Welcome back. You can tell I'm very happy to be here with you this evening, as always. We have Jerry George, we have Nick Fillmore. He's from Canada, eh?
Hey.
And he's here conducting a series of workshops with our local journalists. They have been going very well for the past 2 weeks. We have one more week. As Jerry said just before the break, we're going to welcome Wesley Gibbings for the earlier part of this week, and he'll be here with us discussing media in a Caribbean context, because most of what we experience here in St. Lucia affects Trinidad, affects Grenada, affects St. Vincent, and I mean, going along that line, Jerry, the Media Association of Grenada this week up in arms, and there is a big controversy down there over some statements made in a paper by a local journalist, one who's very well seasoned, Raul Titus,
right,
and I'm sure that you have heard his name on our local media in the past. He was fired by the Advocate in Grenada because he carried some stories relating to the government. Well, not the government, but the party, which is in government, and there was enough pressure on his manager to have him fired. No, this is something that we have to consider.
Exactly.
As a local
the thin line between where government begins and where the party line stops. And I think this is something that we as journalists always have to be, very, very, wary about. But if I could just ask Nick, do you find in your training in other parts of the world that persons prefer overseas or outside of the island trainers rather than local trainers in the areas that you visit?
Well, my preference now is very strongly as local people. I do a lot of work in Africa, but in Africa, my work largely is organizing and arranging things. I had a long media program in Sierra Leone over 4 years, and we arranged for trainers to come from South Africa, which is the journalists there are the best trained and so on to do that work. The other thing we did in terms of size, instead of having people go in on technical things from a big paper like the Globe and Mail, we picked a little weekly in Canada that's roughly the same size as the weeklies and the dailies that existed in the countries we worked in Africa. And they had a real camaraderie and they got along really well, so that was helpful. Now, much of the world now, we've had Canada, I've helped put on training of trainer programs for a number of years now. And most countries in the world now do have trainers that are skilled enough that we don't need to send Westerners to do that kind of thing anymore.
But in terms of the preference, I know from our standpoint, I mean, we lament that all the time, that people tend to believe that anything foreign is better.
Yeah.
What has been your experience?
I think that, I've done this in, where have I done this now? In Ghana, in Liberia, in South Africa, Sierra Leone. I think they value their own people and their own culture and so on. I've seen it change there quite a bit over the years. It might have been that way 10 years ago, but I don't think it is now. Last year I was in Guyana and did this similar kind of program, and I've also done it in St. Vincent. And it didn't come up as an issue. I don't think either of those countries basically had anybody locally probably who could have done it at this stage. But I don't sense that. I think they want local people to do it now.
Well, that is interesting, because I know for Guyana, you have a lot of seasoned journalists and who have been contributing to regional debates and discussions and writing regionally. So it will be interesting to hear that you're saying that there was nobody in place at that time. It might just support our argument that people tend to go for the outside rather than focus on who they have or put the value in their local journalists.
There are talented journalists there. They just haven't become accustomed to calling themselves trainers yet.
I see. And that's a big difference. You might know how to do it, but then how to impart that knowledge, that's something totally different.
Yes.
But also, I think one thing that happens totally in the Caribbean is the sort of immigration of the trained journalists to other, associated areas of the media, public relations, as they call it, corporate communications. And so even if you wanted to be a trainer per se, you already have something that is, not journalistic by itself. And I think this is an unfortunate situation that is happening all across the Caribbean, because sometimes some of your best writers, some of your best broadcasters, gravitate towards where the money is,
Right.
and who can blame them? But if we are to sustain, if we are to sustain,
His fingers pointing in a certain direction.
as they say, when one is pointing at me, the others are pointing at you. Right?
Back.
No, but I think it's unfortunate because most of the trained persons go to these other areas, and they leave a vacuum, and that vacuum creates the opportunity for the persons who enter the field to not have the passion, to not have the focus on professionalism, and to not have the sense that, I want to be a great journalist or a broadcaster. It's just, business as usual. I'll go out there, get 2 stories, and I'm happy.
Yes, I think that is a difficulty in the region. A little different in Canada. What happens in Canada is that you've been in the media 15 years at the CBC or the Globe and Mail or somewhere, and you've worked your way pretty well to the top of it, and there's nowhere else to go so much, so you take the extra $25,000 a year and you do jump to public relations. So we lose our good people in that way, that they feel they've done it all and they just want to go do something else. So we have the same issue, but a little different way.
So how do we sustain this, Henning?
Oh my goodness, sustain the media here, you mean?
Not the media, but the training, right?
The training.
What would you recommend? I'm not jumping ahead,
right?
Because I'm sure you're going to make some recommendations, but from your sense.
Yeah, I am encouraged by the program that's being discussed at Monroe.
Yes.
I'm pleased that it's for mature journalists to study in the evenings and on weekends and so on, I understand. And I hope that a lot of people take that, because you do have a number of people. Journalists here are fairly older compared to some of the other islands, and I'd like to see older people build their qualification and skills and so on. So I think that's very good. I think perhaps you need to prepare proposals and make presentations, perhaps to the British Embassy in the region and the Americans and so on, and ask the owners, the managers here, to pay for part of it, and gradually bring in some other people, and have maybe have a couple of journalists from here go to Canada and learn things there, and train a couple of trainers in that kind of way. I think that would be a good idea. It's going to take time. I do think with Monroe, if maybe someone like myself can make 2 or 3 more visits here, and if a bit of it catches on, I think we can see some quite good changes within 3 years, probably. I think it's possible.
I remember many years ago, the Bahamas.
You're not that old. You're not that old, Jerry.
You're dating yourself, Jerry? Come on.
Many years ago, the Bahamas Broadcasting Corporation had worked out something with Ryerson in Canada, where they sort of sent a group of journalists, and with a special program that the Ryerson had designed for them, using their skills that they were coming with, and how to develop, bring them up to date. And if we could get something like that, it will also work out very well.
I think with the Media Association back on its feet and the thrust that we have, focus on professional development, that this is a very real possibility. I think there are opportunities out there that we just need to grab onto. And the fact that we are now organized, I've always said that being organized is the greatest asset that you can have. Because as I said, Jerry, soul voice in the wilderness. I mean, yes, he did his part, and he continues to do his part, but this would not be enough. So with a coming together of minds and also bodies, I think there is more opportunity for growth. And you being here, Nick, I'm sure that we'll want to make that an annual event and have other trainings throughout the year, where if we don't really focus on journalists, there are also technical people involved in the process of news production, and we have to get them trained too. We have to get them involved. So it's not journalists pulling one way and those other technical people and people involved in the business otherwise pulling different ways. we have to get everybody in sync so that we're going the same way as far as news production, as far as our journalistic efforts are concerned.
And I think what has happened too is that the public now realizing that we need to sort of up our game. And in upping our game, they realize too that the standards must improve. And I think there's a groundswell of people who are willing to support us in ensuring that, you know, professionalization of the media does become a reality. And that is something that we really, as journalists and professionals, have to take advantage of, you know, of people wishing to see us move ahead.
Great. Nick, final words. What are you looking forward to in the coming week? And when can we expect to see you again?
Well, the coming week we're going to talk about libel law. I've talked a lot in the last 2 weeks about ethics, which is something that journalists do need to pay attention to. And I'll have another really good meeting with the managers to see if we can talk about maybe pulling a few more bucks eventually from here and
eventually.
there. Not right away. So those kinds of things.
Can I just ask Nick one question, and perhaps he can prevail, you know, with his vast experience. If
he's buttoning you up to knock you out. Get ready.
You heard us talk about a particular story, which is about the police, right? If you were an editor, how would you approach this?
This particular story,
Yes.
I don't know enough about it, I'm sorry, Jerry, to really say. I heard you talking about it, but beyond that, I don't think I can help on that. I'm sorry.
Oh, Nick is going to run for office very, very soon, taking the political route out of that one. Yeah, but Nick, it's really a pleasure to have you here. It's a pleasure to have you on our set for the Press Club. And I'm sure that we'll be in touch. We want to build on this relationship that we have started.
Okay,
I hope you have enjoyed your time here with us, or you're enjoying your time here with us.
I have very much, yes. It's a wonderful island and great people. I have.
Great. So very soon from now, we'll see Nick again, coming back to St. Lucia, providing training in other aspects of media. And we'll get other people, young ones and older ones, involved in that process. So again, thank you, Nick. And it's really, really good to have you here from us here at the Press Club, and also from the Media Association of St. Lucia. I could switch hats on this one. Well, you're watching us on the Press Club, and we thank you for being part of our program. We want you to stay tuned to this station. We'll be back right after these messages.